Freedom giving a little post-election analysis after things have died down a bit. We did a full night of election results. We went until 5 in the morning, 5 in the morning in the end, which was a bit epic. And it was all very interesting. And now we've had, I think, three weeks, is it, of a Labour government again. And I've got some people to help me kind of analyse that. First of all, we've got Jane. Jane, do you want to introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes, I'm Jane. I'm no doubt the oldest person on this panel tonight. Been an anarchist since probably the late 60s, been involved with class war, other anarchist groups. That's it really.
Excellent. Yes, I've been involved with class war a bit as well.
Oh, I thought I knew you.
Yeah, yeah, hello. And also I've been writing for Freedom about British politics for about a decade. And we've got Simon as well. Do you want to introduce yourself, Simon?
Yeah, I'm Simon. I've been a general gopher at Freedom for the last 20 years odd. Mostly work on the publishing end of things at the moment.
Yeah, can we still say that we're experimenting with these broadcasts, or now we're doing a third one? Are we past experimentation?
I feel like we're always experimenting. This is not
Yeah, absolutely.
But is it fully
the
formed
tech
yet?
growth thing is a continual experiment.
It's a bit like anarchism. No, it's not fully formed yet.
It
we
never
might
will be.
What I wanted to do to begin with is partially because on the election night, I spent a lot of time thinking about questions I needed to ask people on the broadcast and didn't spend a lot of time actually thinking about how I felt about everything. And after the election broadcast had finished at 5 in the morning, I carried on watching the results coming in on the BBC, and I suddenly felt a little bit different. I began to just be a little bit normal away from streaming stuff, and I felt a bit emotional about the Tories going, and I started, not in a oh I miss the Tories way. The opposite. I felt emotional partially, I think, because when they came into power in 2010, it directly meant my job was up for grabs as a trade unionist in the civil service, and indeed they did get rid of me. And it's around about the same sort of time that I was able to really start thinking about anarchism and started to be able to call myself publicly an anarchist and that sort of thing. So I felt quite emotional about it, but I didn't feel the same as I did in 1997 when the Tories were last previously kicked out of power, which I think was a bit more joyous. But I just wondered about how other people feel and felt at the time. And what about you, Jane? When did you, first of all, did you stay up and watch the results? And
No,
did
I was
you?
actually on holiday in Crete with my grandson, who has
Oh,
just
nice.
turned 16. So he was up all night listening to it, watching it on his phone. And I went to bed and just, he told me the results in the morning. And it was just like, oh, okay, so the Tories have gone and what we got, fucking Starmer, blah, de, blah, de, blah. Right, let's go and just have some breakfast somewhere. It's just one of those moments when swapped Rishi for the son of a tool maker, big fucking deal,
A little bit
Christ.
more positive than that, but but I like it. I like it. I think this is the thing. We, as anarchists, there isn't one perspective, is there? There's lots of different
Yeah,
experiences, and you've seen more changes of government than I have. And
yeah.
one of the things I was interested in asking you is about that change, if you can remember, in 1979, going back a bit, when Thatcher came to power. Did did that did people know that she was going to be
That vile.
so terrible?
I don't think they expected her to be that awful.
Mm,
Um, so no, I think it was a shock, and I think it was a shock to especially the Labour movement,
mm,
just how awful she was going to become.
yeah,
So I don't think anybody expected her to be so quickly that evil.
yeah. And of course, class
Um,
war played its part in getting rid of her as well, didn't
yeah,
it?
yeah,
But what about 97 then, when Blair came in? I mean, obviously Blair is now well known for the Iraq War and so on. Obviously, that was in the future in 1997. Did you feel any sense? I was only 21, so it was the first general election that I really properly was involved with. But in 97, did you sense a chance of things getting better than what they were saying, wasn't it?
Again, it was really nice to see the Tories gone, the sort of, the sort of the spawns of Thatcher going.
Yeah.
But then you just knew with Blair, it was just going to develop into shit, and it did. But that's the old cynic in me about politics. So
yeah, no, that's what you're here for.
I didn't enthuse. I knew it'd turn out to be fucking rubbish, and it was.
Yeah, yeah. It's strange.
So yeah.
It's a strange thing, isn't it, that that we're in this kind of situation again. But Simon, sorry, I've neglected you. What did you? How did you feel? What did you think to it all?
What, with 97 or with
the current one to begin with?
I mean, the current one, I very much delight in the discomfort of Tories, and it was a very, very uncomfortable night for the Tories, and I did thoroughly enjoy that. I mean, my reaction was largely what I've been writing for the last however many years. It's like Starmer's, his entire pitch is just being a more competent version of the Tories. Competent neoliberalism is never going to delight me, it's kind of, I don't know, like my entire experience of politics from 97 onwards has largely been a kind of initial burst of enthusiasm followed by an increasingly grim realization that things are kind of gently spiraling in a particular direction. So yeah, like I didn't really take any comfort from Labour taking power, I suppose.
Yeah. So you remember 97 quite well then?
Oh, yeah, well, I wasn't. The thing is, so I was 16 in 1997.
So
it was, politically, I was a complete neophyte. I maybe social democrat-ish, leftish, but knowing almost nothing. But my take on Blair was still pretty much like I never trusted his grin, I guess. Like I just had a visceral response to the way he presented himself, which said this guy is a grifter. Like that was always my take on him. Like I don't think I was right because I had a great political nous or anything, but that was just my impression at the time.
I think I had a similar expression. I was doing my politics degree, and thought I knew it all. Really didn't, and probably still don't. But it was like all of this stuff I was learning was interacting with politics at the time, and it got me very enthused. Except for the fact that I looked at the parties and I thought I don't like any of you. I don't like any of them. What am I going to do? But there we are. So we're now stuck with Starmer, presumably for at least 4 years, probably 5, depending on.
Don't do that. Make it even more.
Oh. And then he might win another election. I was like,
no.
Well, the situation is, Jane, as I'm sure you know, that if he doesn't win next time, then there's a chance that it's the Tories again, or even worse. Who knows? So we've had 3 weeks, and I want to ask another general question of you both now. Have you spotted anything that Labour has done that you actually like so far?
Well, I mean, I suppose there's a sort of in there, in as much as there's bits and pieces which Labour clearly feel that they need to at least kind of orient towards, which I think ideologically the Tories were pressured by their own side to not. So you've got things like a sort of vague push, a vague take on more workers' rights, and more and sort of not a completely head in the sand approach to climate change. But the problem is that this comes with so many caveats. Like I think the Labour rights set up as they're presenting it, it's already been largely gutted. And I was reading an article in the FT the other day where they were laying out the rough strategy that industry was going to take to essentially fillet the workers' rights bill even further by saying, well, small business can't do this. Like if you immediately change this, then companies are going to go under because they can't afford it. Like all the like, and these are arguments that they didn't need to make under the Tories, but I remember them making them under Blair, and they were very effective. Partly because you've got the revolving door of ministers wanting to get a bit of money after their term has ended. But yeah, like I think the fundamental problem at the moment with kind of looking at their direction of travel is that it's not going to be where they end up, and you can already see, and you can see before the election they'd already gutted large parts of their original offering. I can only see that continuing.
Have you seen anything, Jane, that you like?
I suppose I don't like it. I mean, but I mean, at least the Rwanda scheme has been scrapped. I mean, they did do that daft thing of forgetting to tell Rwanda that they'd scrapped it. So Rwanda are now sulking and won't give them back their 24 million, whatever it is. I mean, but that's about it, really. Everything else has been just, I mean, I mean, are you going to go on to things that they haven't done very well?
Oh yeah. Don't worry.
Oh, that's all right then.
I just thought that I think sometimes us anarchists can present things a little bit too black and white, and there might be things that are fairly promising.
It's so easy to do. It's a lot easier, John, than
it is. I know it's a lot. I know it is. But, I mean, having written for freedom for a decade on British politics, I could write a simple thing every month where I just say, trash all this nonsense. I've had enough of it. I want anarchism instead. But there's not much of a call for. There's no point in writing that every month, is there? I wondered about things like, they're proposing to ban things like conversion therapy. That's surely something that we would agree with, right? Or
yeah, definitely. But they plan to. It's all this. They plan to do this. They say they're going to do that. I mean, until something's done, they can well be talking shite.
Yeah, absolutely. And
it's a mix to look good.
And it's a mixed bag as well, because we're also seeing all of that stuff about the Cass report and puberty blockers and all of that sort of stuff. So there's a mixed bag on all of these things. We're seeing positive things. I think I would call it a positive thing, the setting up of Great British Energy, but we don't know yet what that really means and what it's going to do and how much green energy it will produce. But they're kind of talking something that I kind of warm to. So there are some things that I think are pretty good. I'm gonna add another one in, which is more money for the UN agency in Gaza after that was stopped by the previous government. Those are things that might actually, save people's lives. I think there's quite a long way to go for Labour in order to actually have some kind of credible policy on Gaza. But there's just a few things that I think of which, when they happened, I thought, yeah, that's different. That's not a Tory policy. That's something that we need to acknowledge, I think, because our criticism is with the state, isn't it? And the existence of the state. It doesn't always mean that everything that the state does is terrible. I think, personally. So there we go. That's the end of the positivity, perhaps, today. So what about the most recent stuff that's been in the news is around the two-child benefit cap. Right, that's elicited a response. What do you think, Jane?
Oh, it's just, I mean, unbelievable, the arrogance of the man to do that, and then suspend seven of the more popular with the sort of trade unions and the Labour movement MPs. I mean, how stupid is he? So arrogant, he thinks he can get away with it. What an arse. I mean, seriously. I mean, it's just unbelievable. I mean, it's a pretty callous thing to do anyway. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm not talking about the getting rid of the 7 people for 6 months. I'm talking about, the two child benefit cap.
So this is a Tory policy which they
It's a
brought
Tory
in
policy,
to
yes.
stop anyone from getting child benefits if they have more than 2 children.
Yeah.
And Labour are not getting rid of it. That is class.
But then suspending those 7, I mean, it's a very stupid thing to do.
So do you think it's like a strategic mistake?
What do you mean?
Well, you're saying it's stupid. What's stupid about it?
No, stupid on behalf of Starmer.
Yeah.
Getting rid of, suspending these seven MPs that are popular MPs amongst the left of the trade union movement.
So you think it's going to harm him in the long run?
I think it will with the trade union movement. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, what little support the trade union movement is now giving Labour is pretty much going to go now because of that.
Yeah.
Because the sort of favourites with the Labour movement, like John McDonnell and Bergin,
basically suspended a lot of the people you would have thought would have been in a Corbyn cabinet.
Yes.
It's just blatant, isn't it?
Yes. I mean, it's just.
What do you think, Simon?
Yeah, I mean, like, I agree. I think the long term, I mean, he's been storing up problems for himself for quite a while, in terms of if you're in the centre, well, the centre right as he might be, you need cover to do anything that might annoy the Daily Mail or the or the Times or whatever, because otherwise you get hammered from the right continually. And one of the things you need as a centrist politician is cover from the left. If you get rid of all of your left critics, you only have critics on the right, which strong, it gives you less leeway, less flexibility in general to do the things you want to do. Like, as a political move, it lacks a great deal of sense. I also think I think it's interesting that Starmer doing all this stuff, he's doing a kind of posturing effect, which actually he didn't need to keep doing after the election. I think it should. I mean, it's the final nail in the coffin of people who were being a bit overly optimistic as to whether he would shift left again, having got the election out of the way. I mean, clearly that's not the plan, and he's, I do find it funny that he and his cohort were banging on about Corbyn being a Stalinist whenever Corbyn sort of attempted to put his foot down. And you get absolute silence from the press over Starmer doing this kind of stuff, which, just like completely ousting anybody who even slightly disagrees with him.
Yeah. I remember Tony Blair being labelled as a Stalinist by press that even liked him. I mean, things have changed a great deal, and Tony Blair certainly didn't take control of the Labour Party in the way that Starmer has. It's really, but what he's done is a real blunt instrument. What we don't know is what conversations took place behind the scenes, but it would be very easy for Starmer to say, actually, we are against this two-child cap, but we're not in a position to do anything about it at the moment. It'd be very easy to say that. And I think the majority of the public would be satisfied with that. I don't think that's right, but I think they would be satisfied with that explanation. You say the economy is not good enough yet to do anything about it. And you say then to the rebel MPs, just vote for it for now. We will come to it. We will, and you keep them on side, or you try to. It doesn't look like there was any attempt to kind of keep them on side. And, I think this is going to return to him at some point because he's been so blunt. And it's going to be, just to kind of build on what you said, Simon, I think the pressure he's going to get from his MPs in rural areas, which they've won so many seats from the Tories in areas where they've not really won before, with quite low majorities. All of those MPs with small majorities for Labour are going to be thinking, I'm probably only here for 5 years.
Yeah.
I've got nothing to lose if I rebel. And when it comes to things like planning reforms, housing and stuff like that, they're going to have a lot of pressure from their constituents about greenfield sites and not building on them and so on and so forth.
Mm.
The rebellions from the right could end up being much more substantial. And they're the people that he's apparently for. So I think he's unsophisticated as a prime minister at the moment.
Mm.
One thing I would say is that he looks happier now. He seems happier and more at ease, and so does Sunak, which is strange. Like Sunak looks like a whole weight has lifted from his shoulders.
Understandably.
He's telling jokes in the House of Commons like he's the guy to hang out with. You know?
Whoa.
I know. But do you get that sense as well that they both seem happier as in the roles?
Starmer clearly hated campaigning. Like
Yeah.
for all he wangs on about like son of a toolmaker, all this kind of stuff. Like he doesn't like the general public. Like it comes across every time he's out and about when someone like accosts him or something. He's incredibly awkward.
Mm.
Um,
He's not really a man over people, is he?
no. But yeah, I mean, he's spent most of his life now. He's it's one of these things. You can grow up in whatever situation you like. If you've spent 30 years being wealthy, hanging around with lawyers and media people and politicians, they're the ones you're used to talking to, right? You train yourself over time to interact with the people you meet the most. So of course he's awkward around the hoi polloi. He doesn't talk to them.
Yeah. He's not very good at answering questions, or maybe he's brilliant at not answering questions. I'm not sure which it is, but lots of people, whenever they're asking him questions, I think I haven't got anywhere nearer to knowing what he actually thinks and feels about things. He's just very good at just kind of closing things down, I feel.
Well, he's not good at like social conversations, is he? He's just not he doesn't have normal personal conversations. It's all like lawyer, the way you would answer in court or whatever in a legal way. Everything is calculated. It's not a sort of relaxed conversation you have with him.
Yeah.
It's just it's not personable, is he? Is that the word? Yeah.
Yeah, that is the word. I don't think he is, for sure.
No, I mean, I
He's
think
the son of a toolmaker, for God's sake. Don't you know?
But
he hasn't mentioned it since he got in power. So
yeah, he's cut right back, hasn't he?
No, he's mentioned it several times.
What since?
Yeah, there was an event he was at today where he mentioned it. In fact,
oh no, as if we haven't forgotten.
I think he thinks that people don't know enough yet. There are lots of people in the population who probably don't know that his dad was a toolmaker because they're not that interested, maybe. I don't know. I want to come back to something you mentioned, Jane. You mentioned the Rwanda scheme. I just thought we could have a discussion about immigration because they're still committed to actually processing people outside of the UK, aren't they? In a third country. They're just against the Rwanda scheme. So
I can't find out anything else about it. I don't know what the fuck they're up to.
I don't know what their plans will actually.
Or do they know what the fuck they're up to?
Well, I suspect it will be having some kind of mechanism where people can apply at British embassies and consulates and things like that. And therefore they don't ever arrive here in the first place. It might be that sort of thing. Or it might be removing people like the Tories wanted to, but a country that's a little bit more acceptable than Rwanda, which is hugely problematic still, isn't it? Because it's, well, I mean, the immigration system is an abuse of power.
Yeah.
Anyway, whatever is happening to the people that arrive here, people should be able to go wherever they like. And I just wonder how we feel about that. This looks like it's a little bit more humane, is the way I'm kind of thinking about it, but it's not necessarily.
No, but we don't know what they're doing, so we can't really tell. I mean, it's bound not to be particularly nice because it's involving the government and the way they treat asylum seekers, which is shit anyway. So it won't be good.
Yeah.
Oh, fuck, I don't know.
Face pressure from Reform, I guess, won't they? Reform will be carrying on shouting about immigration.
Yeah, I mean, all the pressure on migration is going to come from the right, and it's going to be I think it's going to be one of the most difficult parts of Starmer's tenure is there, because there isn't a solution, right? There's not a, wavy magic wand, all of a sudden migration ceases to be a problem.
Mm.
Or not that it is specifically, in political terms, because the things which drive people to migrate don't disappear. And the things which drive people to go thousands of miles through hostile territory to reach Britain, they're not suddenly going to become less motivated because of actions that the British government take.
Mm.
So he's not going to reduce migration in any serious way. And Reform are going to completely hammer him over it. Because again, the whole Labour pitch is being better than the Tories at doing the things that the Tories want to do. So whilst he's getting rid of Rwanda, he's getting rid of it because it's inefficient, which is correct, because Rwanda is highly inefficient. But he's got, what do you replace it with? You're not putting gunboats in the Channel. I mean, maybe you are, but it's a big leap, right?
We hope
So
not.
it's a completely insoluble problem. I think it's going to be a nightmare for Labour to work through.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think it's an impossible thing to do well on in the terms that they talk about doing well in it, because people will carry on coming. But the way it's talked about is as if the public are demanding it, and ever since Brexit, that's what we've been told, isn't it? That the public expect control of the borders. I never hear anybody talk about it. They might occasionally mention, some kind of like backhanded comment about immigration and housing or pay or something. But on the whole, people don't go on about it, I don't think. And maybe I'm not mixing in those kind of
Mixing with
reform.
bigots.
Yeah, I don't. No, I don't.
Bigger in the bigots.
Yeah, thank you very much. I have a feeling that might be. It's not my band.
I mean, you get the usual moans. Oh, there's too many of them over here. Blah de blah de blah. But no.
I mean, sort of on YouGov, just pulling up the numbers, you've got health and the economy both rate significantly higher than immigration and asylum. So it comes in sort of, I think, third on the overall, but that third is not spread out really. It's mostly within, there's a section of the British public which obsesses over it, and then it's just like most of the, like, if you're just hanging, like the sort of people I hang out with just don't really talk about it or think about it. It's just, there's people around, fine.
Also, the media just tells us that it's the most important thing all the time, not through polls, but by mentioning it all the time and having politicians that talk about it all the time. And I suppose we're going to expect even more of that now that there are more Reform MPs. But I'm also not convinced that the Reform MPs are going to make a lot of headway over the next 5 years. And I think it remains to be seen. There's a lot of people will be scared that they're going to, but I don't think it's something that's assured. I mean, Nigel Farage, when he comes under any kind of scrutiny, is pretty poor at answering questions. But, so is Donald Trump, and he's probably the most famous person ever. So, it doesn't necessarily do them harm to be like that. But we will wait and see on it. But I think you're right. It's difficult to know what they're going to do, so it's kind of difficult to criticize in any detail. But coming back to something you said, Simon, about Starmer wanting to be, I can't remember your exact phrase, but wanting to be more competent than the Tories. A competent immigration system is perhaps something to be feared. Rather than something that is brilliant, like if he's going to be more competent than the Tories at being horrible, then we'll see what the actual measures are when they get published. But it's got to be a risk that they are actually really going to be good at doing something which isn't a positive thing, if that makes sense. I wanted to talk about things like protest rights as well, because we've got Tory laws in place now where peaceful protesters are being locked up for seriously long times with not having the possibility to even talk in court about why they did what they did.
Yeah.
We are in some quite dark territory. We've moved from a country that was undoubtedly a liberal democracy with all of the problems that entails, and we've lost a bit of the liberal bit, haven't we? How do you've done a lot of protesting, Jane, I think over the years.
You could say that, yeah.
How do you feel? Where are we now on protest?
We're up shit creek. I mean, seriously. I've never known anything like it. It's unbelievable just what you can and can't do, and the sentences people are getting. I mean, it's just, I just don't know.
Yeah.
It's just, it really is shit.
Yeah.
You feel so stuck because of it.
I mean, we've done like slow marches and tending not to do sit down protests because you just get picked off. But even just a few years ago, marching slowly was fine, wasn't it? And protesting slowly, the police were there to make sure you could do it, so they blocked the roads and stopped the traffic. And in their sense of things, from their point of view, they think they're facilitating protest. Now it's just you can get banged up for that.
Yeah.
Makes it very hard to organise protest, I think.
Yes, it does indeed. So, I'm glad I've done my decades of doing it, because if I was young now, I'd be certainly stuck with the.
Does it just mean you
I've heard that a few times.
Sorry.
No, I mean it's. I mean, there's been a ongoing decline in the amount of commitment, I suppose, to the right to protest. That's obviously stems from sort of the 60s and 70s onwards, really. You've got this kind of foreshortening of things like the animal rights movement and the road protest movement and the sort of the rise of injunctions at the time. You've got the what was the act? Criminal Justice Act?
Criminal Justice Act, yes.
Yeah.
In the mid-90s, that one?
Yeah, no more than 3 people with repetitive beats, I seem to remember.
Yes.
And
that was the first protest I went on against that.
Was it?
Yeah, it was.
Oh, good campaign as far as I go. You've got this sort of gradual process of the state kind of reeling in what it presents as acceptable types of protest. And the most recent round of this has been has gotten to the point of saying anything other than state allowed A to B marches, it smacks of a form of extremism. And the direct linking of the exercising of your democratic right to protest as undermining the process of democracy. So you've got various people sort of on the right who equate protesting against what the government is doing as anti-democratic, which is an incredibly dangerous suggestion to make. This perspective that if less than a third of the population in any given election votes for a thing, it must be absolutely without any hesitation adopted wholesale, or you're being undemocratic. Like it's this kind of bleak utilitarianism that that kind of ends up with essentially first past the post version of majority rule, which is an absolutely astonishing abrogation of responsibility to the broader general public and what it needs and wants, let alone giving up on any conception that what the government does might just be wrong. You elect a government which then makes a bad decision, but you're still stuck with them to the next government. Like it's the whole this whole lack of critical thinking around the reasons why protest and disruptive protest are an integral and important part of a liberal democracy. We're not even talking a revolutionary situation or, like a movement towards socialism or anything like that. Just the replication of a liberal democracy involves the need to allow these things. And getting rid of it is an astonishing shift in the political centre ground, and one which, like, it's easy. I mean, you can kind of look at how Starmer treats his own politicians and say, well, he doesn't seem to have a much better attitude to this sort of thing. Like if even your own parliamentarians can't vote the way that you've asked them to, then what chance is there that he's going to repeal these laws?
We've been going down this path for quite some time, but I think one of the changes was when Boris Johnson became Prime Minister. He put in place a set of ministers like Priti Patel, who introduced the Rwanda scheme and got tougher on tougher on protest, and then Suella Braverman, and that was quite a shift from when Theresa May was Prime Minister.
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of Theresa May, but I remember there was a report on extremism and politics and protest and that sort of thing. I think it was to do with the Prevent program at the time, if my memory serves. And she said that she didn't want to include anarchism in that. But I think we're included, aren't we, in all sorts of things now, as a danger and a threat, which makes me think they're probably overestimating our numbers and our strategy and
don't be mean. Don't be mean. Come on.
You run a hardcore bookshop, I'll have you know.
You don't see me as a threat, huh?
I'm trying to put them off the scent. But there's been a real change. There's that advisor to the government who I think is still the advisor to the government, even though the government has changed. I can't remember their name, but they produced a report on political extremism and political violence a few weeks ago. It wasn't that long ago, was it? A Labour lord, I think, whose name escapes me. But so they are still interested in that sort of thing. And it's ironic because, of course, I've been following all of this week and earlier the Spy Cops inquiry. And the Spy Cops inquiry is showing that they've obviously been interested in anarchism for quite some time, including freedom and including class war. Although I don't think anyone in class war can remember who the person is who was involved with class war.
You did have an awful lot of weirdos coming in and out of class war. We never bothered.
Was it obvious that they were police spies, or was it was it difficult to tell? Or I hear various reports about there'll be someone who'd turn up and they had a van, which was very helpful, so they used to just basically pretend to be useful and take people places and take stuff to places. Is that the sort of person that we're kind of talking about?
No, I don't think there was ever any people with vans in class war. I think it was probably more the like the environmental protesters, the ones that were sort of were that when they were sort of road protesting all those. I think it was more them. I think rather than organisations like CW.
And there was someone who was writing for freedom as well, wasn't there, Simon? I think.
Yeah, Roger Pierce. He was actually ended up. He was one of the founding members of what replaced the SDS. NOPU, I think, is that the one?
Don't know.
But yeah, he started out infiltrating freedom and then went on to become a very senior cop, basically running a lot of their undercover work. It's been interesting. So I've read through. So freedom is on the is included in the Spy Cops inquiry because of Pierce. So the Friends of Freedom technically is included. But as with class war, almost nobody remembered who he was. There was one guy who got in touch after I wrote an article about it, who remembered him quite well and sort of said this guy showed up with a sort of little Trotsky-ish beard, and started and a car and started driving around. Oh, come on, brain. Who was the elderly anarchist woman who fought with Macno and was at Kropotkin's funeral? Pop quiz.
I know who you mean, but I can't think of her name. I
You
know
know,
who you mean.
but he used to drive her around. He acted as
Yeah.
her chauffeur for a bit. But this was all for freedom was regarded as kind of a jumping off point to get to other groups. A lot of his write-up, like very typically for infiltration of left-wing groups, it turns out that most of what we were all doing was kind of, boring organizing meetings to do stuff which wasn't all that subversive. So he has all these little write-ups, which are essentially little character sketches, because he's got nothing more interesting to do with his time.
Yeah, amazing. And someone very carefully, kindly rather, put on our live chat, Baron Wolney. That was the guy that did the report recently, wasn't
Ah,
it? Yeah. So I imagine he's going to be still around and involved with advising the government on political violence, I think it was about, and extremism in general. So I imagine we're going to get more attention because I can't see that Starmer's going to shift away from that,
no.
because it's not his style, is it, at the moment? Or it seems to be not. All the while, there's an irony here, isn't there? Because they've inherited a prison system which is bursting at the seams because the Tories have been locking up many, many people, and now we've got peaceful protesters joining uh,
Mm,
that prison population. It seems like something's got to give somewhere. They've either got to imagine up new prison places from nowhere, or they're going to have to start to change the structure of sentencing, I would have thought.
Well, one
But
of the things that they would try, so the Tories, and I think Labour before them, um, have been touting this kind of new wave of mega prisons, which they've been attempting to build way out in the middle of nowhere. The idea being to replace all of the old, decrepit um, prison estates in cities with places which are, very far removed. Um, but the general trend has been that they promise these places and then they never emerge, or at least they only really manage to kind of replace like for like or with a very slight increase in places. Um, but yeah, they keep upping the ante when it comes to hardcore law and order because the media spends all its time complaining that the crime rate is going through the roof, whereas in fact the crime rate has been falling um, statistically for quite a long time. Um, I don't see them suddenly being able to turn around decades of inability to even produce the prison places that they say they are going to.
mm,
Um, so yeah, like they're already, they're talking about getting sort of letting people out who are doing non-violent crimes, which
yeah,
fantastic.
mm.
They are even looking at I think it's IPP sentencing, isn't it?
Does that stand for?
This is indefinite public protection, I think,
I see.
is the acronym. It's the one where there's thousands of people who were sent down for brief periods, but then just left in prison
oh, yeah, yeah,
indefinitely.
yeah.
They were,
Don't know about
an
this.
ongoing threat.
Mm,
Just yeah, no, legally speaking, they made a law to allow it, and then at one point said, "Yeah, no, this is clearly wrong," so stopped it. But the ones who were already in there still going in many
mm,
This is
cases.
like the US three strikes and you're out type
Yeah,
thing.
and I mean, absolutely incomprehensible um, system as it is.
yeah.
Mm,
They are talking about finally getting rid of that, which that would be a genuine victory. Like if you want to talk about things that Labour might do just by being more competent,
yeah.
then that would be one of them.
One of the things that the previous Labour government did back in the early noughties was to focus on reducing reoffending rates by rehabilitation. And I was in the Home Office when all of that was going on and know a little bit about it. They were doing things like making sure that people who were leaving prison had some kind of infrastructure to help them when they got out again, so that they didn't immediately have to steal, for example, to fund a habit, or because they didn't have a home to go to and that sort of thing. Trying to focus on those sorts of things that help people not go back into prison pretty much straight away. And I'm not sure that the Tories have done any of that or focused on that at all. I think they've focused very much on punishment, rather than reducing reoffending rates. So there are things that they could do, which kind of makes sense and focus. It kind of helps communities as well if communities are getting people back in who have had a chance to do something different with their life. They've maybe got a qualification while they're in prison or whatever. But yeah, I think it's going to be a real big issue, and it's the sort of thing that kind of leads to all sorts of problems in prison as well, doesn't it? You know, overcrowding can lead to rioting and can therefore lead to people getting even tougher sentences and staying in longer, and all sorts of stuff. It's just not sensible to be locking so many people away, and yet we have this sentencing of protesters as well. It just seems a bit bizarre, really,
Yeah.
that we have people who aren't a threat to the public in prison anyway. You know, people that have perhaps can't afford to pay their fine, end up in prison for not paying
Yeah.
their fine. I mean, it's just locking up working class people, isn't it? Basically.
Yeah.
So we will see how that develops. You had a list of other things that you wanted to say, Simon. So I'm relying on that. If you've got
I
things
mean,
we haven't talked
you've
about
covered a
yet.
fair number of them, I think. So I suppose one of the ones I had on my list was the council funding crisis,
Oh yeah.
which is, I mean, in terms of how people experience the cost of living crisis and the lack of safety net, a lot of it is that the council, things that the council used to do to help people have all been stripped back to either the bare minimum or just being gotten rid of in a lot of cases. And there's a number of councils, both Tory and Labour, who have been declaring bankruptcy or giving severe warnings that they're going to be declaring bankruptcy. The Tories essentially ignored it. Labour was at one time talking about reforming business rates, which seemed to be the closest that they were getting in many cases to having a formal proposal on the table. But it seems that councils and their ability to actually deliver, because when you're talking about sort of helping people to be rehabilitated, and sort of ways to stop people from going back into prison, councils are usually the front line of this kind of stuff. And since the 80s onwards, really, they've had more and more power stripped away from them in terms of being flexible with the way that they spend their money, in terms of raising money, and in terms of, essentially coming up with policies which connect to local people. From an anarchist perspective, that centralization process is something which governments will always want to do. It's sort of a part of, the tendencies of the state to want to centralize power. And councils themselves, have endless problems of their own. Robert Tressel famously hated, writing The Ragged Trousered Philanthropist, was incredibly critical of councils and their tendencies to be locally corrupt and inefficient and all that. But the lack of flexibility and the lack of kind of ability to target, I suppose, is something which, like big state tends to have that problem, right? And as much as one of the interesting things I've thought about the way in which the Tories have been criticised in the last few years is that they've been criticised for being too big state. And on one level, it's ridiculous, right? Because they keep cutting taxes and they keep removing themselves from major institutions like Royal Mail or whatever. But on another, it's kind of accurate because they can't keep their beaks out of stuff. Like you know, where I'm living, the council has statutory requirements, but it has very little power. Like ultimately, it could be Labour or Tory in charge, and they would have little to no room for manoeuvre.
Mm.
Most of what they do is rubber stamping central government policy.
Yeah, they kind of, I mean, the Tories like this kind of idea of armed length kind of working, don't they? And I think Sunak's been a master of it at times where he's refusing to do anything about anything. And I think that's part of his downfall. But yeah, generally speaking, the last 14 years has been them sticking their noses in and interfering, and in quite a Tory way, about giving power sometimes to the local people that they like, which is what Levelling Up was largely about. I think Labour are going to do a similar thing, actually, with their Keir Starmer setting up a council of the regions and nations, isn't he? Where he's going to invite the
Yeah.
metro mayors and the first ministers of the nations into a meeting with him every so often, and you know, trying to get agreements across the country and give them more money to do things. In the name of decentralization, giving more money to devolved people or devolved areas, but via those very powerful people who have hardly any checks against their power. So you're going to see local kind of I don't know what the right word would be. They're like kind of
Governors,
fiefdoms. What did you say, Si?
governors.
Governors, yeah, yeah, that's right. But perhaps without the democratic control that governors in some countries might have. But yeah, it's a bizarre situation. So I actually feel as though Labour are taking even more control, particularly for money at a local level. And it's not going to councils, is it? It's going to these powerful, mainly men. I think they're all men actually, in terms of the metro mayors, aren't they? And most of them are Labour as well. So it's quite handy for Starmer to be giving money to his mates, really, to deal out and then say, look at what we've done in your area. You need to vote for us again. So it's part of the game of liberal democracy as well, which is a little bit frustrating. If you've got anything else, that's great. I've got something else I wanted to mention, which was to do with Labour having the support of the newspapers, or some of the newspapers. And I read recently that part of the reason why they got the support from the Murdoch press in particular is because they are not going to do anything more on Leveson, the Leveson inquiry into the way the press have treated people, privacy and so on. I don't know if you've got anything to say about that, Simon.
I mean, you know, having worked in and observed the media for a while, sort of the general thing with the media is that every maybe once a decade, there'll be a big hoo-ha about whether the media should be more heavily regulated, and the media will lean strongly on the idea of this is an attack on the fourth estate, and it'll all kind of fizzle out because the media is um, relied on so heavily by the political class to deliver them votes, essentially.
Yeah.
I don't see anything changing under Starmer when it comes to the media. I think the it wouldn't surprise me at all if the media continues to centralize.
Yeah.
Although that said, you know, I think possibly technology and commerce may overtake events because I think that, you know, I mean, Novara Media is very fond of calling it legacy media as opposed to, you know, new media on places like YouTube or whatever.
Like
Uh,
us.
Indeed. Um,
New media. I mean, we've been going since the 1800s, but we won't worry about it. We should be up there with the broadsheets. Anyway, yeah, yeah, no, I think that's right. If there's anything else, have you got anything else, Simon, before we move on to what I think might be our final thing to talk about? Great pause.
I did have a couple of bits, but go for it.
Okay, I just wanted to focus on the Tories a little bit because they've got, I think, 99 days to choose a leader. Um, what direction do we think they'll go in? What do you think, Jane? What do you think about?
Oh God, not cleverly, please. I just don't think I could handle him. Oh, James stupidly rather than cleverly, but oh, please no.
Is he the left-wing option?
I don't know what he is the option of, but oh,
It's
God no.
quite an unusual list, isn't it, of
Yeah,
the rogues gallery.
I think is it Kemi Badenoch is not in it anymore. Is that right?
Oh,
Or
really? Is that
I
correct?
don't know. I thought she'd been decent. I don't know.
I'd be
But
surprised
but
if she
anyway, I
was.
hope it's not her because she's a massive transphobe. But
Hmm,
um,
I think they probably all are.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, any views, Simon, on where the Tories go now?
Oh God, Robert Jenrick's a candidate as well. God, it's just
Oh
dire.
no, is he?
Yeah. Sorella
Um,
Braverman.
I mean, Braverman seems to have destroyed her own campaign before it
Yeah,
even got started by being. I mean, it's quite something to be so obnoxious that the Tories are like, ah, maybe not.
yeah,
Yeah.
Um,
There are rumours that she will join Reform
yeah, yeah. I'd heard that.
if she doesn't get on the ballot paper.
I wonder. I mean, she strikes me as someone with a gigantic ego, and
Mm.
Reform really only has enough space for one gigantic ego. Um,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
she might, but then she might also crash out again. Who knows?
Mm.
I don't know. Like the future of the Tories is, uh, I think, weirdly tied to what Farage chooses to do.
Mm.
Um, you know, there's a faction in the Tories who want to just go ahead and merge with Reform, which I think. I mean, I can't see Farage going for that because at the moment he has a party that he not only controls, but he's literally the company CEO.
Mm.
Um, like I can't see him wanting to give up that level of control to become a
Yeah.
big fish, even become a big fish in a Tory pond.
Mm.
What if it gave him enough MPs to be leader of the opposition? Do you think that might change him, or is it? I mean, that's probably fanciful anyway. But
Like he's
I'm
been
now thinking of all the
flirting
possibilities.
with going with the Tories for such a long time and
Mm.
never took the plunge, even when at various stages it looked like, he could be
Mm.
sort of either the kingmaker or the guy in charge.
Yeah.
Um,
Back in '97, they swung to the right, which, looking back, was obviously a silly thing to do because they'd lost MPs to Labour and the Lib Dems.
Mm.
And actually, if they'd moved more to what people call the centre, but that's a bit of a silly phrase, or silly word, they might have got back into power sooner if they'd moved more in a kind of David Cameron, Tony Blair style thing earlier. And I think they're going to make the same mistake again. I think they are going to go to the right again to try to head off the Reform Party, which right now looks like it's got momentum, but maybe won't in a few years' time. And so I think they will move towards somebody who is a kind of Farage light, and they'll take it in that direction. But actually, the seats that they need to win back are now in the hands of Labour on the whole. So they need to be moving more towards Starmer and showing that they can competently, if they want to win again, that's what they're going to have to do in the long term, unless the country is shifting further to the right itself. But right now, it's too early to say. And there will
Mm.
be people who think we've got to be extremely worried about the far right, Farage and others,
Mm.
because obviously we're seeing around the world and around Europe, we've seen that rise.
Mm.
So it's not impossible for Farage to continue to do well. But my gut instinct is that we've still got a two-party system on the whole. We've still got first past the post, and Farage is likely to kind of disappear in the long run. I feel. I might be
Farage has
wrong.
a
Well, it'd be nice if he did, but
Hmm.
I mean, the old canard is that about a third of the British public um, will reliably vote Tory, and of that third, as we've seen, a bit less than half, maybe 30 to 40% of those will go further right into the Farage camp.
mm.
Hmm.
But that's not enough.
Yeah.
to win significant seats and win an election. That's just not a strategy that either Farage, it doesn't win Farage the election and it doesn't win the Tories the election. All it does is split them into two halves, neither of which can win. So from the Tories' perspective, they've got to, in some way, destroy Farage and reunite the Tories before they can take on Labour. And I can see going further right being used as an attempted tactic to do that. But I think they have a problem with doing that. Why would people abandon Farage for people pretending to be Farage?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you stay with the gold standard of crap politicians?
I think the one to watch out for is Tom Tugendhat, for what it's worth. Former military man. I can imagine the Tories getting quite excited about that, just because of who he is and what his history is. And if he says the right things about reform and the sorts of things that they're worried about, immigration and so on, law and order and security, I think they could coalesce around him. So that's my tip. But who knows?
It's a very posh sounding name though as well, isn't it? Sugar's Hat. It sounds like, sort of like country manor type man.
Yeah, I don't know anything about his schooling or whatever, but I think we can probably guess. Maybe he might well have had a nice little.
Are there any of them left who aren't public school?
Who knows? Who knows? But there we go.
It sounds the name of a man who likes fox hunting. Myself, that's what his name sounds like.
Yeah, God, and haven't we seen
that sort of name in Jodhpur? I'd say so. My last one, I guess, was talking about how we as anarchists approach this kind of.
Well, that's good because I was going to end with this sort of thing. So let's do that. Yeah. So what do you think?
How we approach it, I probably better not say how I would like to approach it, because even my thoughts about how I'd like to approach it would probably get me another nice strong sentence. So I'm going to shut the fuck up.
It's all probably bloody incitement laws, aren't they?
I've spent some time with you in a courtroom, Jane. It was a good day, actually. It was a good day.
It was a good day.
Yeah. A victory. Just imagine it. The police were rubbish that day, weren't they, actually?
Well, they're lying, that's why.
They were. They were, and they were found out to be, which was great. But what do you think about organizing then? So we've talked about how difficult it is with the new protest laws and all of that sort of stuff. And I live in the middle of England now. I don't live in London. When I lived in London, I always felt like there was a protest every weekend I could go to. And here I don't get that so much. So my impression is that anarchism's kind of gone a bit flat in terms of protest. But I don't think it's gone flat in terms of organizing so much, like community organizing, because I know that you're.
No, I mean, I think there are a lot more little community-led projects and sort of like mutual aid things going on than there ever were.
Yeah.
And I think in a lot of ways, that's the best we can do and build from.
Oh, I feel so happy I've managed to get you to say something positive about that. That's fantastic. Yeah, I agree. I think there is a hell of a lot going on. What's your perception, Simon?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Like so I'm in the town where I grew up. When I was in my early 20s and we were just trying to get something going, there was nothing, like, it was just a complete dead zone. There were very occasional not very well attended trade union marches. There was a Green Party sort of thing, all those kind of, like tiny little bits and pieces. The town was deeply homophobic, and people I knew got attacked for being too effeminate and all this kind of stuff. And I'm back again, having spent a long time in London. I'm now back again. And there's so much more stuff going on. There's sort of a food co-op, and there's a radical housing co-op, and there's been some really solid protests around Palestine and Gaza, which surprised me. There's more radical left groups than there used to be, some of which came out of Corbynism. And I think there is more scope now to organise things. again on a mutual aid basis, than there were when I was younger. And when I was I was in my 20s in the early 2000s. There were a lot of much bigger protests going on, but yeah, they were very much sort of in the big cities, and you didn't really see so much of it outside. I do think that, so without talking about what should happen, I think there is some value in talking about what might happen. And one of the things historically about making lesser forms of protest illegal is that it prompts people to be a bit more all or nothing. Because if you're going to be breaking the law anyway, why not break a window, essentially? That's the logic. I'm not saying it's good or bad, just saying that's the logic. I think you store up a lot of problems for you. Like, one of the logics of liberal democracy allowing protest is that it allows people to let off steam without an actual detonation of anger, without riots breaking out. And riots don't really pay attention to whether you've got a law that says if you're too noisy on a protest, you'll be nicked. That's not a thing in riots, right? I think the government could well face some really shocking surprises due to its own hubris and thinking that it can just completely contain protest and just kind of shove it off to one side and make it totally useless. I mean, that's in a way an optimistic take, if you like. But
that'll learn them, won't it?
It does have some historic basis.
Will that not make them even stricter about protest, though, if there was a period of rioting like we had in 2010, 2011?
Quite probably, but then you get into quite a vicious cycle, right? Because as with arresting JSO people and actually sending them down, if you fine a person, then that person is fined. They have to pay back the fine. It becomes a big deal in their life, but it doesn't drive them outside the confines of everyday society, right? It doesn't turn them into a criminal. It doesn't screw up their job prospects so much, all this kind of stuff, right? If you send people down for a prison sentence, when they come out of prison, they have lost, they've lost connectivity with the world around them. They've lost that sense of stake in society, and it makes them much more dangerous in those terms as a protester, as a political animal, because they've got less to lose.
And they cost a lot of money. Putting people in prison costs an awful lot of money. And they're not productive, so they're not producing tax revenue. And there's all sorts of reasons why things could go in a more positive direction. I like this. This is great. We're going to have anarchism by the end of the month. Oh no, that's a few days' time, isn't it? We've got longer than that. But
I don't mind. That'll do.
What I suggest we do is wind things down and commit to freedom doing this more regularly, I think. So maybe at some point in August or early September, when politics starts again, we'll have perhaps even more to talk about.
I mean, I think there's a lot of scope for doing by topic as well, and actually sort of specifically saying, well, we know people who are expert in disability rights, for example, or whatnot, and actually sort of drawing them in to have a proper conversation about topic by topic.
Disability is something we missed out, actually, and that's an important thing that the government is listening to Alan Milburn, who was a minister during Tony Blair's time, and wants to get tougher with people who are claiming benefits and kind of almost forcing them to work, even if they can't, kind of thing, which is a Tory policy, basically. The Tories have been talking about for decades.
It's low-hanging fruit for a new Labour type, though, because it's a cohort that doesn't matter to them. Okay, well, thank you both very much, and we'll leave it there, shall we?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Someone knows.